नंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरवन चारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 प्रभुपाद।
जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर श्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस अभय चरणारविंद भक्त वेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की ताई गौर प्रेमानंदे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम Canto 6, Chapter 17, Text 20. Guna pravaha etasmin kah shapah ko anugrahah kah swargo narakah ko va kim sukham dukkham eva va। Guna pravaha etasmin कह शापः कौन अनुग्रहः कह स्वर्गो नरकः को वा किं सुखं दुःखमेव वा। गुणप्रवाहे तस्मिन् कह शापः कौन अनुग्रहः कह स्वर्गो नरकः को वा किं सुखम दुःखम एव वा। Vaishnavis, गुण प्रवाह in the current of the modes of material nature. Etasmin, this. Kaha, what. Shapaha, a curse. Nu, sorry, kaha, what. Nu, indeed. Anugraha, a favor. Kaha, what. Swargaha, elevation to heavenly planets. Narakaha, hell. Kaha, what. Va, or. Kim, what. Sukham, happiness. Dukkham, distress. Eva, indeed. Va, or. This material world resembles the waves of a constantly flowing river. Therefore, what is a curse and what is a favor? What are the heavenly planets and what are the hellish planets? What is actually happiness and what is actually distress? Because the waves flow constantly, none of them has an eternal effect. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings, Miche mayar vashe yacha bhise, kacha habu dubu bhai. My dear living entities within this material world, why are you being carried away by the waves of the modes of material nature? Jiva Krishna Das ei vishwas, karle ta ar dukkha nahi. If the living entity tries to understand that he is an eternal servant of Krishna, there will no longer be misery for him. Krishna wants us to give up all other engagements and surrender unto him. If we do so, where will the cause and effect of this material world be? There is nothing like cause and effect for the surrendered soul. Srila Vishwanath Thakur says in this regard that being put into this material world is like being thrown into a mine of salt. If one falls into a mine of salt, he tastes only salt wherever he goes. Similarly, this material world is full of miseries. The so-called temporary happiness of the world is also misery, but in ignorance we cannot understand this. That is the actual position. When one comes to his senses, when he becomes Krishna conscious, he is no longer concerned with the various conditions of this material world. He is not concerned with happiness or distress, curses or favors, or heaven or hellish planets. He sees no distinction between them. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanushalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So I'm grateful to be here with all of you today. And today morning, the last part of our discussion, or three-part discussion we've been having on, when good people do bad things. How do we understand that? Why might good people end up doing bad things? So we discussed in the first part about how do we see the intentions. Generally, whenever anyone does any action, discussing, say, this one person, other person here. So now, say both people are, so basically is a good person. So Parvati is a good person, Chitraketu is also a good person. So when good people do bad things, how do we process that? That is the issue. So first is we can look at the intentions of the other person. Then we look at the cause. How much is the other person responsible for our action? Is it our own karma that is responsible? And then now today what we're going to focus on is the action or the response. So in intention we discussed how we tend to jump towards negative conclusions for people whom we don't like. And we jump towards positive conclusion. Okay, I think this summary is becoming a bit too much. How many of you have not heard the previous 2 sessions? Okay. So I'll not go too much into summary because it will become more confusing. So basically, we had been discussing how do we respond when bad things happen to us. But it's not just bad things happen to us. When we see a good person is doing something which is hurting us. So first we discussed, let's try to give the other person the benefit of the doubt. Assume the least negative motive for their actions. And then when we are facing a situation, what caused it? Is that person the cause? Is karma the cause? Is Krishna the cause? That the focus be on, we try to find that cause-effect framework that helps us act constructively. That helps us choose to act dharmically, choose to act in the mood of service to Krishna. So now, in this particular passage, the theme is, he is saying over here, Chitraketu, that actually all the dualities of this world are inconsequential. That whether it is a blessing or a curse, whether it is happiness or distress, even heaven or hell, these are all just inconsequential, insignificant. So broadly speaking, this verse is largely typifying means representing the jnana approach to dealing with distress. In the broad Vedic tradition, there has always been the problem of distress. That this world is dukkhalaya. Now, when we are facing distress, how do we deal with this distress? So there have been 2 approaches. Mainly, the karma approach and the jnana approach. And then the bhakti approach has been, you could say, a remarkable and remarkably flexible combination of karma and jnana, which goes beyond both of them, ultimately. But let's begin with the karma approach. It centers primarily on dharma, whereas the jnana approach centers primarily on moksha. So in the karma approach, now karma kanda is one aspect of it, but it's not only reduced to that. See, in the karma approach, the idea is this world is governed by certain principles. If we understand those principles and we learn to harmonize ourselves with those principles, then we can live better in this world. So it's like if somebody is driving in a foreign country and they are just constantly getting the ticket, they're getting fines, and maybe they're driving in India and they're driving in America, you drive on the different side of the road, it's confusing, it's confounding. Then I just need to understand the rules. If I understand the rules, then I won't get in so much trouble with the law. And then my ride can be smoother, it can be safer. It can even be a joy ride, I can enjoy driving. So the idea is understand the rules and harmonize with the rules. And within the karma context, material dualities are given significant importance. Like being fined or being rewarded. It's a big difference. So the idea within the karma context is going to heaven is very good. Going to hell is terrible. And this difference is not insignificant at all in the context of karma. The karma worldview says that while there is distress in this world, if we learn to live harmoniously with the principles of living, then we can minimize the suffering. And in fact, we can even find happiness here. Now, it is ultimately true that everybody is going to die. But people say, yeah, everybody is going to die, but at least you can live happily before you die. Isn't it? You don't have to be miserable all throughout your life. So in this case, the idea is that what is the action that is right, what is the action that is wrong? Now, of course, how do you determine that is a big question. But the one aspect of determining is the consequences. action that gives us good results. That is good. So for example, here also to some extent, like giving up greed, giving up some kind of excessive sexual activity, excessive lust and all those things, that's considered good. And we see these two approaches coming in conflict between the discussion with Narada and Daksha. So sometimes we just dismiss karmakanda as mundane sense gratification. It's not that simple. Because even when Daksha wants his sons to continue to have progeny, first he says is, go and get some discipline. Go and do some austerities. So the idea is, become disciplined. And today parents may not want their children to go to the Himalayas to do any austerities. But you go to a university, there also you have to do some austerity. Studying is not easy. It requires hard work. And then basically the idea is you become worthy. You learn some basic ethos of discipline, responsibility, and then you come back in the world and engage with the world. So basically the karma marg, within karma, see there are different, the idea is that a person should try to increase the sattva as much as is possible for them. The amount of sattva in a brahmana will be different from the amount of sattva in a kshatriya. The amount of sattva in a vaishya from the amount of sattva in a shudra. But everybody should try to. This is the karma marg. And this is the amazing worship of the devatas comes within that we worship the devatas. Then they can give you results and you can make your life better. Now the jnana marga, so basically you could say in the karma marga, the approach is basically minimize the negatives. You cannot eliminate the negatives, but minimize the negatives and maximize the positives. So everybody has to grow old. But if a person has lived throughout their life with some healthy habits, then when they get old, their quality of life will not be terrible. They will have a decent quality of life. So the idea is, for the general maintenance of society, the karma marg is quite important. In fact, when Krishna comes to establish dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge, it is, Krishna is not necessarily teaching bhakti immediately. Krishna is not saying bhakti samsthapanarthaya. It is dharma samsthapanarthaya. So the idea is, Krishna is coming to establish material order. Now of course, material order is ultimately, if we consider 4.7, 4.8, 4.9 and 4.10. These four verses, the first two are about establishing dharma. Paritranaya sadhu, yada yada hi dharmasya and paritranaya sadhunam. So this is more here, dharma is more of social order. Krishna wants that society be governed in a way that is harmonious with the broad principles of living. And then 4.9 and 4.10 is Janma Karma Chame Divyam and Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha. This is more about bhakti. And this is more of an individual choice. It is more of an individual responsibility. So the first has to be established, the second has to be inspired. You cannot say, I'm not inspired to follow the traffic rules. Well, you may not be inspired to follow the traffic rules, but the cop will be inspired to give you a fine. Isn't it? So that's dharma is not an option. Now bhakti is of course good and auspicious if somebody practices it, but that's an individual choice. You cannot force love, isn't it? So just as love can't be forced in this world, love can't be forced toward Krishna also. That has to be voluntarily chosen. So the karma marg is a major part of the Vedic tradition. And within that, yajna, dana, tapa are considered very important. And that's why Krishna in the 18th chapter also says, yajna, dana, tapa, karma, na tajyamiti chapare. Don't give these up. Pavanani manishinaha. These will purify even the great souls. So now, apart from that, so here the idea is maximize the positives, minimize the negatives. And that is the way to function in this world. Now, to some extent, the Western modern way of living takes some aspects of karma, of the karma marga, but basically it removes all higher realities from it. That means the idea of there are higher devatas or there is the law of karma. They also understand there are certain principles. And you see, in karma, the karma marga versus, say, science and technology. Ultimately, everybody is trying to deal with the problem of distress. Science and technology also, what are they trying to do at one level? They are trying to minimize distress. It's cold, okay, let's have heating system. Walking is difficult, let's have a vehicle. Being separated from our loved ones is difficult, let's have some means of telecommunication. So it's trying to remove distress. There's one what is the word? Not a technologist, technocrat. There's a techno-plutocrat, they call it. Like those who believe that technology is a solution to all problems. He says the purpose of technology is not just to solve problems you have. He says the purpose of technology is to solve problems that you don't know you have. So quite often, in principle or in purpose, everybody, every philosophy or every approach to life is trying to deal with the problem of distress. So sometimes, because science and technology involve a lot of intelligence, at least in trying to understand things and how things work. So there are various thinkers within the Indian tradition who have tried to bring about some kind of correlation, parallels between, say, Indian thought and Western thought. And many of them try to say that the scientific technological approach is actually similar to the Jnana Marga. Because there also we are analyzing, we are thinking. Well, it's not that people who are following Karma Marga are not thinking at all. But in terms of purpose, science and technology is much more similar to karma than to jnana. Because in both, there is an attempt to access higher powers. In science, higher powers are basically the laws of nature. Whereas in Karma Kanda, there are the deities of nature. But both say Hiranyakashipu's approach or Rikasur's approach to try to get power to be more destructive, and say modern technological attempts to gain weapons of mass destruction. Both are attempting the same thing. That when there is distress, what is the solution? We try to gain more knowledge and gain more power thereby. So there is Francis Bacon, who is often quoted, knowledge is power. Now, while that statement is true in many ways, but he used it in a particular sense. He was saying that nature is cruel. And to the extent we have power, we will be able to protect ourselves from the vagaries of nature. Nature sends storm, nature sends earthquakes. The more power we have, the more we will be able to protect ourselves. And there is some truth to that. We can't stop earthquakes, we can't stop rainstorms. But if we know a storm is coming, we have some good reliable predictive mechanisms, then we can minimize the casualties. So the point is that these have, now science, as I said, it's divorced from higher realities. So in that sense, it's not exactly, it's significantly different from karma marga. But in terms of purpose, it is the same. The purpose is, we try to make life in this world better. Whether it is by praying to the devatas and getting benedictions from them, or whether it is funding the scientists and technologists and getting some gadgets from them. It's the same thing in purpose. So that is one approach to this world. We try to maximize the positives and minimize the negatives. Now the other marg is the jnana marg. The jnana approach to dealing with suffering is to focus on the insignificance of both happiness and distress. So, happiness and distress, both are insignificant. Why? Because both are temporary, both are going to come and go. And now that things are temporary and we should tolerate them, that is a universal human insight. But specifically within the Jnana Marga, the idea is that we are not material beings. Now there is that idea within Karma Kanda also, but that is not a prominent idea. The Karma Kanda idea, if you are going to go to heaven, that means there is some part of you which continues to exist. So, it's like the key difference is, or let's put it this way, it's like I have a soul versus I am a soul. So I have a soul is the karma understanding. Now this is generally not the scientific understanding. So in that sense there's a difference. But this is the more of a jnana understanding. So the focus is, if I am a soul, then the soul becomes central to my identity. And then whatever happens at the bodily level, that becomes not so important. So to a large extent, this is the cause of the difference between the moods of the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam. Both the Gita and the Bhagavatam are going to go towards bhakti as the conclusion. Of course, Bhagavatam bhakti is not just a conclusion, bhakti is consistently emphasized throughout. But both of them are coming toward bhakti from different places. Because the context is different. In the Bhagavatam, it's spoken to Parikshit Maharaj, who has been cursed to die in 7 days, and he has accepted that curse. He has decided not to counter it. Now, of course, Shringi had his own malicious motive. He could have cursed Parikshit Maharaj to die in 7 days. Or he could have cursed Parikshit Maharaj to die right away. Why keep him for 7 days? The idea is, suffering is different for different people. Now, so suppose somebody is very intelligent, and suddenly they are put in a place where they can't answer a question, or they can't refute an argument. Or somebody else who is not so much invested in intellectual activity, okay, you couldn't answer a question. What's the big deal? For a person who is intellectual, what else is a big deal? There's nothing else as important. How could I not answer this question? So, similarly for a Kshatriya who is powerful, there is no suffering worse than being put in a position of powerlessness. So the idea of Shringi was, you consider yourself to be such a powerful king that you offended my father. Now for 7 days you'll have to powerlessly watch as death comes upon you. And you can do nothing about it. So his idea was, not only will death be your suffering, but the 7 days before death will also be suffering. But of course, what Parikshit Maharaj did was, he turned and took shelter of Krishna by hearing the Bhagavatam. But basically, the Bhagavatam is being spoken to a person who has basically turned his eyes away from this world. And that is why the focus is on the insignificance of everything in this world. That kind of theme comes again and again and again in the Bhagavatam. Whether it is the forest of material enjoyment, or it is this particular section of Chitraketu. This idea that, all relationships, they are temporary. Now we just meet with people like say twigs meet in a river, or dust particles meet in a sandstorm. All that is there. And that's important in its own way. But the idea is that everything here is temporary. So the good and the bad, both are insignificant. And therefore go beyond both of them. Go beyond the good and the bad because it's temporary, and go towards the spiritual. So the Jnana Marga has been emphasized a lot in the broad, in the Bhagavatam, generally speaking. Now if you see, I said Gita versus the Bhagavatam. Because if you see the Gita and the Bhagavatam is spoken to Parikshit Maharaj, who is already renounced the world. And now the Bhagavatam is speaking a message to reinforce his renunciation. But the Gita is spoken to Arjuna, and the Gita's focus is on engaging with the world. Krishna wants Arjuna to engage. So, while Krishna talks about dualities, and Krishna talks about being steadfast amid dualities, of staying steady, but the Gita's focus is very much on acting in the world. It is not about renouncing the world so much. Acting, of course, the higher consciousness, but acting in the world. So the idea is that these two approaches, Karma Marga and Jnana Marga, both of them are valid approaches within the Vedic tradition. Now when we come to the Bhakti Marga, what is the approach of Bhakti in dealing with distress? See, Bhakti is inclusive. So sometimes Bhakti may draw something from the Karma Marga, sometimes Bhakti may draw something from the Jnana Marga. And that is why it is Jnana Karmadi Anavrutam. It is Avruta. What is Avruta is made, what is covered is uncovered. So in Bhakti, both approaches can be used. The Karma approach, the Jnana approach. Now of course, the Bhakti worldview is significantly different. See, if you take this further, it is not just I am a soul, it is I am a part of God. The defining spiritual insight is not just I am a soul. The defining spiritual insight is that we are parts of God. We are meant to serve God. That is the key principle in Bhakti. So, it's not so much, you could put it that if we have the Karma Marga, we engage with the world. In fact, the positives of this world are often glorified. If you have a good family, if you have healthy relationships, you have good health, you have wealth, you can do not just enjoy life, but you can also do so much good in the world. See, it is not that the karma kandis are just uncontrolled sense gratifiers. Even the karma kandis are punyavan. They get wealth, they give charity. To some extent, in karma, the world is glamorized. Glamorize means, oh, heavens are so wonderful. If you do punya, you can do can get so much good in the world. Now, if you look at jnana, the world, the approach is glamorize the world. Now here, demonize the world. The world is a terrible place. The pleasures of this world are actually what are the baits that will get us into trouble. So, the troubles of this world are bad, but the pleasures of this world are worse. Because they will trouble us. They will entangle us. They will seduce us. So, the Jnana Marga is, everything in this world is dark and deadly and dangerous, and we just turn away from the world. Now, the Bhakti Marg is about utilize the world. So one is, we look at the world and try to make it better. We look away from the world and just neglect the world. Bhakti Marg is, we look at the world while looking at Krishna. We see Krishna and we see that this world is connected with Krishna. This world is the domain of our service to Krishna. This idea comes primarily in 1846, where Krishna says, Yataha pravrittir bhutanam yena sarvam idam tatam swakarmana tam abhyarcha siddhim vindati manava. So the idea is, this is the material level, this is the spiritual level. So Krishna exists at the spiritual level. And one idea is, we practice bhakti to go from this material world to the spiritual world. Now that's a valid understanding. But there's another understanding that actually Krishna pervades all of existence. So Krishna is not just present in the spiritual world, Krishna is also present in the material world. And if we are serving Krishna here, that can also be bhakti. So here, that's what I said. When we just consider this world, okay, this world is a temporary place, I have got to go to spiritual world. There, we are adopting something from the Jnana worldview. So it's not literally Jnana, but something is adopted from the Jnana worldview. This world, all its dualities are temporary, they are insignificant, they just don't matter. Forget about it and just move toward the spiritual world. Of course, in the Jnana Marga, the focus is more on Brahman than on Krishna. But so there are differences. But just I'm saying the approach, not the specifics, not the destination, neither the process. The process is different, the purpose is different, but the overall approach, the overall vision, the view of the world, that is similar. And now when we engage with the world, there is karma. So when we engage with the world, the idea is, if we engage more harmoniously, we can make the world a better place, relatively speaking. When Prabhupada started the Juhu project, it was interesting, he did not call it Vaikuntha on earth. He called it heaven on earth. Now why heaven on earth? According to our philosophy, heaven is not such a great thing. In fact, the way often we present it, like, what's heaven? That's like my dirty backyard. Isn't it? We present it like that. So why heaven on earth? See, the point is, of course, it's a spiritual world. And I've talked with different devotees. It seems Prabhupada was never directly asked that question by anyone. It's surprising now in the second generation, we're recognizing that while Prabhupada answered an extraordinary number of questions, but there are so many important questions that nobody asked Prabhupada. So it is, if we had direct position statements of Prabhupada on many issues, it would be very helpful. So anyway, but the point is that, so why did Prabhupada use the word heaven? Now, then Prabhupada might have been, Prabhupada might have, not saying it's not been asked, there is no record of Prabhupada being asked this question. There is no record in the sense that what happens is human memory is also a mysterious thing. Sometimes we forget things that have happened and sometimes we remember things that have not happened. And it's not that we are cheating, we actually think it has happened like that. So anyway, so I tried to find out, but I've talked with different devotees who are involved with the project. So what I understood is that Prabhupada was using the word heaven more in the sense of opulence rather than ultimate destination. That is, the idea was that even in our tradition, like the Jaipur, the temple is magnificent. So the idea is we can use opulence in this world to attract people towards God. So Krishna is present in every temple wherever he's being worshipped, and certainly in all the temples that Srila Prabhupada started. But this temple was expected to be extraordinarily opulent. And so the idea of heaven is, there is opulence over here, but within the opulence there is devotion. So people are attracted. So it's not that the temple itself is called the heaven on earth. It's like the whole temple project is called heaven on earth. The temple is Vaikuntha. The temple is the spiritual, is Golok Vrindavan, but it is within the framework of great opulence. So people will be attracted to material opulence, and within that they will come towards spirituality. Now what do we say when we say material opulence? See, Prabhupada, for example, he said to Indian businessmen that I went to America with 40 rupees and now I have 40 crore rupees. Our temple's worth 40 crore rupees. So Prabhupada said doing business with Krishna is very good. You should also do business with Krishna. So we may say, is this karma kand? Well, it means you are saying you go to God and get something material from God. The point is, karma kand is not sinful, isn't it? The point is, if yena kena prakarena manah Krishna niveshayet. So what Narad Muni did with Dhruva Maharaj? Dhruva was convinced that my only way to happiness is if I get a kingdom bigger than my father's. Or he was not even thinking of happiness. The only way to relief from distress, for me, my heart is so hurt. The only way to relieve from distress is if I have to get a kingdom bigger than my father's. So Narad Muni is flexible. First he uses the jnana approach. He says, if you are mature, then you understand pleasure and pain are all insignificant. Why get so worked up about it? And what does Dhruva say? What you're saying is true, but it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me. My heart is too wounded for it to work for me. Then Narad Muni appreciates his candor. And then he gives him some method that works for him. So basically, he comes to God for getting something material, which is broadly the karma approach. But in that process, he gets higher realization. So the karma marg and the jnana marg are, you could say, their approaches both can be used when we are facing challenges in the world while practicing bhakti. But in bhakti, the defining criteria is not whether the dualities of this world matter or they don't matter. In karma marg, the defining criteria is that the dualities matter. So go away from negative things to positive things. If you are poor, you do this puja, you do this, you work hard, you do this, and gain money. So the dualities matter. And in jnana marg, the dualities don't matter, don't care for it at all. But in bhakti, we are not so much concerned about the dualities, whether they matter or not. We are concerned about Krishna and serving Krishna. So within the service of Krishna, how the dualities play a role? So if we are more on the positive side of duality, does it help us in our service to Krishna? If you are on the negative side of duality, does it help us to connect with Krishna? Sometimes there may be distress in a person's life, and because of that distress, that person may be pushed, may be inspired towards serving Krishna. And yes, that's wonderful. If distress can make a person connected with Krishna. So, frustration can often be the initiator of devotion. The frustration is not the sustainer of devotion, because the nature of the frustrated mind is that it will get frustrated with devotion also after some time. Isn't it? So frustration alone will not keep a person going on any path for very long. So basically, in bhakti, it is dualities. Are they important? Are they unimportant? That's not the main issue. It is service to Krishna, connection with Krishna. That is the most important. And then we can move towards service to Krishna from positives. We can move towards service to Krishna from negatives. Whichever way one moves toward Krishna, that is fine. The important thing is to move toward Krishna. And if we study Prabhupada's life objectively, as objectively as is possible for us, you will see that in one sense, Prabhupada's outreach had two distinct phases. One was his outreach in America, the second was his outreach in India. Now, his outreach in America was largely coming from this jnana attitude. That, Prabhupada's mood was that whatever world people were living in over there, just forget it all and just move into the temple. Just move into the temple. This world is temporary. And the ethos was that, okay, everything in this world is simply an entanglement. Just get out of it. So this was the jnana marga for the Western disciples, Western followers. Now, Prabhupada's approach was very much like the karma marga for the Indian life members. Now, what does it mean? Like I give the example. Doing business with Krishna is a great thing. So, the Indian life members were very much settled in their life. They had their family, they had their businesses, they had their jobs, they had their social lives, their careers. And see, Prabhupada often, even before he went to America, his appeal to these well-settled Indians was, I'm just using Indian in the third person, I'm an Indian, but just for analysis purpose I'm using that right now. we'll talk about. But Prabhupada's appeal was not that whoever is the main breadwinner in the family, you renounce and you become a missionary. Prabhupada says, give one son of yours. So the point is, he's not disrupting the whole society. He says not that you give up your family and you become a sannyasi, a preacher, whatever. You give your one child. You have multiple children, give one child. Now it's interesting that approach which Prabhupada used in the pre-ISKCON outreach, 1940s, 1950s. There is hardly any evidence of Prabhupada using that with the life members. When he would go to people's houses, he was not really telling them, give one son of yours. He was basically encouraging them to connect with Krishna. So for them the connection was primarily through giving some donations and having an opportunity to come into the temple and stay in the temple. So what happens is, many of the Indians, they came to Prabhupada at that time mainly from the karma marg. Karma marg means what? That it's our culture is so great. And now our culture is Indian culture versus Western culture. When we use it, this very approach is karma marg. Because India and West both are illusion in jnana marg. Isn't it? So both are Maya. And it doesn't make any difference whether this is more degraded Maya and this is less degraded Maya. It's just Maya. But when Prabhupada's approach was what? That is, if you have beautiful temples, and it is more like it was when he brought his Western disciples to India. Prabhupada was the first spiritual leader among many other spiritual leaders who went, that Prabhupada insisted on his disciples adopting a particular dress. Now, there are some Hindu scholars who says, Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada didn't really preach spiritual Hinduism. He preached cultural Hinduism more than spiritual Hinduism. And he said that was not, in that he broke ranks with many spiritual leaders who went before him and after him to the West. So now, was it that Prabhupada was simply preaching, first of all, whether Prabhupada was preaching Hinduism literally, that's a different issue. But, see, when we say culture, culture is very much a part of this world, isn't it? Say, oh, this is the temple culture is very beautiful, or the architecture is beautiful. Well, if everything in this world is Maya, the temple architecture is also Maya, isn't it? But Prabhupada was meticulous in principles of hospitality, in principles of architecture, in kirtan, in cooking. So the idea was, Prabhupada, in accordance with the Bhakti Marg, used many of the aspects of Karma Marg. The Karma Marg is what? That there are dualities, and dualities make a difference. So Western culture and Indian culture, these are dualities. And there is a difference. So many Indians who came to him was not because, oh, Indian philosophy is so great, or we want to attain Krishna. Yes, they knew Krishna already. They came because they thought that time, oh, now our Indian culture is so great that these Western people who had ruled us before, now they are adopting our culture. And Prabhupada, when he was teaching them, he didn't say that Indian culture and Western culture both are Maya. That was not the approach he took. He said, he would very much say, this Bhagavad Gita is a book from India. It is your book. And to teach the Bhagavad Gita in India, I need to get people from America. Why don't you learn this book? You can teach it all over the world. In fact, Prabhupada's use of language was often quite mercantile. Mercantile means, say for example, there's one Western scholar, he says that, he says advancing in spiritual life. He says, if you really are spiritual, you should not be thinking of things like advancing and regressing. You should just be peaceful. So the word advancing is a very much a financial word. Will you give me some advance? Or it's, how is the country advancing? So it's about material improvement. But Prabhupada used that vocabulary. So most other spiritual teachers, whether they're Christian or Vedic, they use advancing, it seems like a mercantile. They use the word growth, spiritual growth. That's the word that they use. Spiritual advancing, that seems very mercantile. Prabhupada, in one sense, used those terminologies. So, Prabhupada was into numbers. Now, he was very much into numbers, isn't it? He says, double the book distribution. Why? At one level, it's Prabhupada was adopting the karma mark features. Karma mark is the figures in this world, the changes in this world matter. So when I said that it's like a neat compartmentalization, it's not like that. It was not that Prabhupada using Jnana marg only with his Western disciples and karma marg with Indian, nothing like that. But broadly I'm saying. So Prabhupada wanted tangible things in this world. So Prabhupada contrasted himself, for example, with another Mayavadi leader. He said that he was not able to sleep because somebody had kept a coin under his bed. And his followers said, oh, he's so renounced. And Prabhupada said that, if you give me money in one hand, I will stretch the other hand. Why? Because there's so much service to do to Krishna. Prabhupada's purpose was spiritual, but Prabhupada was very much into using the resources of this world. So why am I talking about all this? We are discussing right now about, a broad topic was that when we are practicing bhakti and we face distress, especially we face some good people do some bad things to us. Say some other devotees do something which troubles us, or something like that happens to us. Maybe we have relatives, we have family, we have colleagues. They're not necessarily bad people, but they do something which is hurtful to us. So as devotees, which approach do we take? Do we take the karma marga or do we take the jnana marga? Of course, we don't take either. We take the bhakti marga. We are following the bhakti marga. But within the bhakti marga, we could take the karma approach or we could take the jnana approach. And both are valid. So it depends on how best can I serve Krishna. How best can I serve Krishna? That will determine which marg I can take. So, for example, yesterday I mentioned this briefly that when Prabhupada, at two main places, if you look at the Lilamrit, he had some property and the right to the property was challenged. One was in Jhansi and the other was in Juhu. When in Jhansi it happened, Prabhupada said, forget it. Prabhupada just decided not to fight. In Juhu, he said, if he wants Krishna, he wants to steal Krishna's land, he will have to go over my dead body. So why the difference? So Prabhupada was thinking more in terms of anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjana. What is favorable and what is not favorable. So he said that, okay, getting involved in a long legal battle over a small property in a relatively small city like Jhansi, where people were also not very serious, it's not worth it. On the other hand, in Juhu, it was a prime property, it was the financial capital of India. Prabhupada had Prabhupada's followers had come there and he had already created a wave in Mumbai. So Prabhupada was ready to fight for it. So the idea is that broadly, in the Jnana Marg versus the Karma Marg. In the Jnana Marg, the key rule is tolerate. All this is temporary, all these dualities will come and go, just tolerate it. That is the insight of Jnana Marg. Okay, this material world, it has a situation, they will come and they will go. But in Karma Marg, it's not just tolerate. It is transform. So idea that it's tolerate so that you can transcend. It's not just tolerate. Tolerate the material so that you can transcend and go to take your consciousness to the spiritual. But in the Karma Marg, it's also, when we are talking about, in Bhakti, we may use the Jnana approach or we may use the Karma approach. So we transform also for the purpose of transcending. That is the ultimate purpose. Now transform, broadly it could be done in two ways. One is we mitigate or we emigrate. So some situation is very difficult for us. What do? If in Bhakti we are adopting the Jnana approach, okay, just tolerate it. Just tolerate it, live with it. It's temporary, it will go. And we as in today's world, as I said, through science and technology, we have gone very much toward the Karma Marg. And we as individuals and as society, we could actually benefit a lot by learning to tolerate. That sometimes the tolerance levels becomes extremely low. And because of that, People just can't deal with any kind of inconveniences. An inconvenience is seen like a disaster. There's one devotee family in North America with whom I stay. So they say that the husband is working in a big marketing position in the company, but he's also like a priest. He learned the samskara, and he does marriages. And his wife is into family law. The family law is just a polite way of saying divorce. So, so they say, they joke, we are the complete couple. You come to the husband to get married, you come to the wife to get divorced. So anyway, this, as Mataji was telling me about sometimes, some of the reasons why people sometimes get separated. So even the word divorce is considered very harsh. They say, I'm not divorced, I'm separated. So separation is like divorce involves, the word divorce itself has the idea of some kind of rupture. But separation, yeah, just gentle moving away, like separation. So there's an attempt to soften vocabulary now, to try to deny the harshness of reality. Like nowadays when somebody commits suicide, it's almost considered offensive to say he committed suicide. In any mainstream newspaper, if you read it, it'll be, he died by suicide. like somebody dies by cancer, somebody dies by heart attack. So he died by suicide. Like suicide is something that happened to him. So, so unfortunately, but the point I'm making is, so sometimes when people separate, so there was this, and quite America, in the Western world, things are very segregated. So like in India, if you go to attorney, the attorney will not just give legal advice. If there's a little older than us, it's like a family elder will give some advice. So you should try to tolerate or something like that. It's just, you cannot do that. If they want that, they'll go to a counselor. So anyway, so there's one Western woman, she came, she said, I want to separate. He says, why? What is the reason? He says, my husband and I can't agree on the temperature for the air conditioning in our house. Now, he said, is that a reason to separate? He said that, actually, I thought, he was my dream partner. He was my, as they call it, Mr. Right. He was my Mr. Right. And if he were really my soulmate, then even our body temperature should be sinking. So now, there are so many people in this world who don't have homes only. What to speak of air conditioners in their home? And here you have a home, you have an air conditioner. You just can't adjust the temperature a little bit. Or can't adjust to the temperature a little bit. So the point is, tolerating is often not something which is understood to be a virtue. Often tolerating is seen as a sign of weakness. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Tolerating also requires strength. So that insight from the Jnana Marga, we human beings, especially in Kali Yuga, where we have through technology quick fixes, or we think we have quick fixes for everything, so the tolerance level has gone down substantially. So many times tolerating can lead to things which seem to be very difficult to deal with right now. After some time they go away. So what does tolerating mean? No. Tolerating, so what we are saying is, how do we deal with situations? One approach is tolerate. The simple point of tolerating means no irreversible decisions based on reversible emotions. That we all, our emotions are often reversible. Today I feel, this is terrible. No, this service is terrible, this particular person is terrible, this particular job is terrible, the weather over here is terrible. It's not just terrible, it's unbearable. See, sometimes the vocabulary also is, I don't just like it. I don't like this. I hate it. Well, hate is a very strong emotion. Like, I hate this food. Really? You hate this food? Okay, I don't like this food is fine. But if you hate someone, you want to destroy that someone. So sometimes, our vocabulary, we just, by the words we use, we try to exaggerate the dualities. But, so tolerating means that my emotions tend to come and go. So these emotions are reversible. So I will not take irreversible decisions based on reversible emotions. That's tolerating. Now somebody may say, but the emotions are not reversible. In the sense that sometimes I feel terrible over here. And it's not just one day I feel terrible, other day I feel good. Every day I'm feeling the same way. So it is not that in bhakti tradition, the only means that is available is tolerate. If you look at the Pandavas, when initially they attempted to poison Bhima, Bhima was enraged and Bhima knew what had happened to him. And he came and told Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira said, we really don't know what was going on in Duryodhana's mind. And we don't know if we bring it out in public, how it will split the family, who will support us, who will not support us. He said, we don't know, so let's tolerate it. Let's keep an eye out. Because see, when somebody makes a mistake, now you could say poisoning somebody is not a mistake. It's a misdeed. Okay, it's something which is deliberately done. But still, he says, we don't know how dark is his enmity, how deep runs his enmity. Just tolerate it. So they tolerated. So, but things kept getting worse. Now, tolerating, the point is that tolerating has two distinct aspects. Keep small things small, so that we can keep big things big. Keep small things small, so that these are not just two distinct aspects of tolerating, but the first is meant for the second. Keep small things small so that you can keep big things big. I was in Australia, I was giving a class on tolerating. And sometimes, after a class, if you ask devotees for how do you find the class, sometimes you get very predictable answers. Oh, they don't want to comment, it was a great class. But sometimes you get very unexpected answers. So, and sometimes, people don't think before they speak what they're speaking. So he says, so I spoke this class on tolerating. And there, this devotee, he said, Prabhu, today's class, I not only heard a class on tolerating, but the class itself gave me an opportunity to apply it. So, I didn't want to say that means the obvious implication is he tolerated my class also. Now, I said, can you explain what you mean? I was trying to, maybe I thought he will realize that he will become embarrassed. Then I wanted to give him a gentle way to let himself down. Can you explain what you mean? He said, actually, I came a little late, I was sitting behind. And he said, I was sitting and hearing the class. But the person sitting next to me was constantly talking on phone. And I was getting very annoyed. But I said, I should tolerate. So I tolerated him throughout the class. And I didn't hear any of the class. So that's why I said that I got more an opportunity to practice the class than to actually hear the class. So I said, see, that is not tolerance. That is impotence. If you have come for a class, the big thing there is to hear the class. If something is stopping us from doing the big thing, then that is not being tolerant. That is letting ourselves become impotent. So the whole point of tolerating is not tolerating. The point of tolerating is transcending. If you see in the Bhagavad Gita also, 2:13 is we are the souls. 2:14 is tolerate, tam titiksha bharat. But what is 2:15? That is transcend. Yam hina vyathyantete purusham purusharshava samadukha sukham dhiram somrutattvaya kalpate. So the purpose of tolerating is not just tolerating. Tolerating is for transcending. Tolerate the small things so that we can focus on the big things. And there's always some small things will be wrong in the world. So for example, if we're sitting for a class and we're sitting on the floor, we don't have a chair and it's uncomfortable. Okay, the class is not going to go for 6 hours. 1.5 hours, maybe I can tolerate it. So that's tolerance. Tolerance is to keep the small things small so that we can focus on the big things. But if some aspect of the duality, say sitting on a chair is comfortable, sitting on the floor is not comfortable, that's a duality. It's a small thing, we tolerate it. But if for somebody the pain is becoming unbearable, then it is not a cardinal principle of bhakti that you have to sit on the floor only. No, if the duality is coming in the way of focusing on the class, then okay, find a chair. Get a chair. There's one devotee in London that a devotee has some severe back problems. He's a very well-to-do devotee. So he actually, when he comes to the temple, he comes in his own car and brings his own chair. It's a foldable chair, but he brings his own chair and he needs a couple of devotees to actually carry that chair because he has back issues. He's serious about hearing the class. And now if you just look at the chair, it can seem like a regal chair. Why does that person need that chair? Well, can't you sit humbly like all other devotees? Well, you can't. If you want to focus on Krishna, you need that, you get that. So the point is that sometimes we may find that a particular aspect of the duality, is a negative aspect of the duality, is so much negative that it just consumes our mind. We're just not able to focus at all on Krishna. Then at that time, this other approach, the karma approach is, okay, this situation is not favorable for my bhakti. So I can't tolerate it, then I'll transform it. Now transforming is possible in two ways. One is, either we change the situation, change the circumstance, we act, that is mitigate. Or we just go away to a different circumstance. Both approaches are valid. If we look at the Pandavas and their life, the Pandavas' trajectory, life trajectory. So, when there was poisoning, what they did was tolerate. When there was burning, when the attempt was made in Varnavarth, what did they do at that time? Sorry? Emigrate, yes. They just decided, they could have gone back and confronted the Kauravas. But they decided not to do that at that time. They decided, let's be discreet. Because if they've gone to such an extent that they tried to make a whole plan to conspire, because it was Dhritarashtra who had sent them. See, the poisoning was Bhima's own initiative. Oh, yeah, let's have a picnic. And he tried to poison. But to send the Pandavas to another kingdom, Dhritarashtra was also involved. Dhritarashtra had said, you go on behalf of us to there. So now, they realized it's a much bigger thing. So they emigrated. And then, during their immigration, their material situation became better. Where they married Draupadi, and now they were allied with a powerful rival prince. And then, again, after that, what happened? They came back to the kingdom, and they were given one half of the kingdom. But what was the nature of the kingdom? The Khanda Prastha was that Khanda was a forest, it was a wilderness. And when they got Khanda, what did they do? They mitigated. They changed the situation. And sometimes people think that practicing bhakti means we have to live in a village. Rural life is spiritual life, urban life is not. Well, the Pandavas converted something which was not just rural. It was a forest into a city. And that they considered it to be a mercy of Krishna. So the point is, that kingdom, that city, became a hub for dharma and bhakti eventually. So it's not that particular externals alone are favorable for Krishna bhakti. So many different kinds of externals may be favorable for different people. So the Pandavas mitigated the situation. Now, if you consider, finally when the war happened, the war was also mitigating the situation, isn't it? When they were cheated and defrauded, again they tolerated. Okay, let's accept it. And they immigrated after that. They did not fight over there. But once they had completed their vows, they had an agreement. We have lived 30 years in the forest. After they don't give the kingdom, then they were ready to fight for it. So there were different approaches that the Pandavas used at different times. But throughout all their focus was on dharma and ultimately Krishna, service to Krishna. So when the Pandavas, for example, not only made Khanda powerful, they performed the Rajasuya Yajna. At one level, the Rajasuya Yajna is a Karma Kanda Yajna. And it is, I am the greatest king. But why did they want to do that? I am the greatest king, so that I can glorify Krishna to be the greatest person. So there are in bhakti different approaches that can be used. So which approach should a devotee use when there is distress? It depends. For us, we have to be able to decide for ourselves what are the big things and what are the small things for me. You may say, okay, Krishna is the big thing. Yeah, that's true. But what approach to Krishna is the big thing for me? Now, some devotees may want to serve Krishna more by distributing books. Some devotees may want to serve Krishna more by studying Shastra. Somebody may want to serve Krishna more by building a temple. Now, we may all have our particular way of connecting with Krishna. That is where we feel most drawn toward Krishna. And somebody comes in that way. Somebody impedes that. And somebody else might be able to tolerate it. But we might not be able to tolerate it. It's like, say, different people come to the temple also for different purposes. I'll just conclude with this last point. The point I'm making is that what is a big thing and what is a small thing. This is not the same for everyone. For different people it is different. There's one devotee told me that, every time I take darshan, darshan is the time when my mind gets agitated the most. I said, really? I've heard different places but mind getting agitated. Is it, he says, you are distracted by all the other people who are there at that time? He says, no. He says, whenever I look at the altar, this devotee himself has a background of decorating and doing things like that, before coming to bhakti also. So he says, whenever I look at the altar, I see all the ways in which that decoration is wrong. He said, this feather could have been at this angle instead of this angle. Instead of this thread, you could have used this thread. Instead of this color dressing, you could have used that color. And aesthetically, it would be so much more attractive. Now, that devotee has a valid point. But then what happens is, the other people will not notice it also. And not only will they not notice it, even if they notice it, it's not a big thing. So he says, when I tell the pujari or tell some senior devotees, he says, nobody takes me seriously. He says, first I am agitated because the decorating is not up to quality. And then I am even more agitated because nobody else gets agitated. So we all, for us, each one of us, something is a big thing for us. And if something is a big thing, that is important. When I used to do editing or proofreading, I've done that service for many devotees, many senior writers. And then because I am a writer, I try to be as possible as conscious of words. I also make mistakes. But for me, punctuation and grammar are very important. And now, of course, at least, when I read any notice, any book, anything, any text I read, and if I see any punctuation wrong, it is intellectual torture for me. I just can't bear it. It's like reading a text with any punctuation wrong. It's like the standard example, it's like eating sweet rice with some sand in it. Just can't bear it. And I would get agitated, and then I would get very agitated because no one else was agitated. Then I talk with Jayadvait Maharaj. Jayadvait Maharaj is also a very meticulous editor. He's 100 times more meticulous than me. So I had an old friend, both of us were very much into language, and he had a hobby that he would buy published books by big authors, and he would read their books, and he would find proofreading mistakes in them. He would mark it and send it to the publisher or the author. And he said that when I read Swami Prabhupada's books, I have read the Bhagavad Gita, and he said I read 3 cantos of the Bhagavatam, and I read not because of interest in the subject. I wanted to find some mistake. I just couldn't find any mistake, grammatically speaking. So Jayadvait Maharaj told me that when we had this, Prabhupada said one mistake kills the book. Prabhupada was very meticulous, and he said that for each book, we had for each volume of the Bhagavatam, we had one full sack of proofread material. At that time the computers are not there, so you print out, read it, mark it, and do it again. So he says, I would not let a book be published unless it had been proofread 25 times at least. So he said, so we asked how many times should we proofread a book? So not more than 50 times. So anyway, the point is, Jayadvaita Maharaj said that, Chaitanya Charan, the way to keep peace of mind is to stop reading notices in ISKCON. So now fortunately, with ChatGPT having come, most people, they use ChatGPT to improve the grammar. So at least my intellectual torture has gone down. But anyway, the point I'm making is that something may be a small thing for me, something may be a big thing for someone else. So we cannot apply our standards. Just because I can tolerate something doesn't mean you will be able to tolerate it. And that doesn't mean that you are a less serious devotee because you're not able to tolerate it. And just because I can't tolerate something which somebody else is able to tolerate, that doesn't mean that necessarily that I am a less serious devotee. Each one of us has to find out what we can tolerate and tolerate it. We all need to increase our tolerance level. But ultimately, this is not the International Society for Tolerance. Isn't it? It is the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And tolerance is a tool for Krishna consciousness. But just as tolerating can be a tool, transforming is also a tool. So transforming could mean that if something is not working, if something is very dysfunctional, then instead of just trying to tolerate it, we try to fix it ourselves. We take the initiative, we take the responsibility. And it's very easy to give suggestions. It is tough to implement the suggestions. But sometimes, that's what we need to do. That's what we may find our calling. So that's how we can transform. And sometimes we can't transform in terms of mitigate. Then we may just have to go to some other service. We may have to emigrate. This particular thing just doesn't work for me. That doesn't mean we just have to become like a rolling stone, gathers no moss, is going from here to there to there. But we find out what is it that helps us most connect with Krishna and how best can we do that. So if we are given one service and then we move towards another service because maybe in that service there's too much agitation and in another service there is more satisfaction. So we have to ourselves take inventory of our consciousness and see how best we can connect with Krishna. And there are different forms of, there are many things which are wrong in our movement. Sometimes some particular things may be wrong, some other things may be wrong. Some devotee may be dealt with unfairly. This may happen, that may happen. Well, if we feel strongly about it, then we act to fix the situation. If we feel we can't act to fix the situation, then take up some other service. What is not helpful is simply criticizing without doing anything. There are hundreds of things wrong in the world, and similarly, this movement is in the material world. So there are hundreds of things wrong in the movement also. So we have to find out how we can connect with Krishna, and for that we tolerate some things, we emigrate from some things, and we mitigate some things. So in that way, what we mitigate, that becomes our primary service. We can't just say, I'm tolerating everything. Okay, tolerating for what? We want to do some service. So for the sake of this service, I'll tolerate other things. So basically, with respect to this service, there is tolerate or emigrate. This we may have to do, but we all try to mitigate something. So some devotee may decide that, now I want to take up the social media of the temple. There's no regular updates. I take that up. You can criticize, there's nothing being updated. Somebody may say, okay, I want to take up the cleanliness of the temple. The temple is so unclean. Okay, that's good. That is, whatever we feel we can't bear, whatever we feel we can't tolerate, that is very likely the direction where we can find a lifelong service. The tolerance alone is not the virtue. And that which we can't tolerate is not necessarily a sign of lack of Krishna consciousness. What we feel we can't tolerate, that's where we may find a service. So if we find that, whatever it is, that there are so many services that come up, that can come up for different devotees in different ways. That okay, some devotees are sick and they don't get good treatment. Then maybe we should create some arrangement for that. Some devotees have mental health problems. Then maybe we create a system for that. So whatever we feel, this thing wrong, I can't tolerate it. Then That's where we can find our service. And we may feel there are many things wrong, but there are many things wrong, but on the scale of wrongness, there are some which are just unbearable for us. I just can't do this. So, then that's where, now of course we do whatever service we are told to do, but for lifelong continue our bhakti, it is good we have something which we feel deeply connected with. And quite often somebody says, what is it that I am irresistibly attracted to? What is that one service my Guru Maharaj will tell me? And then I'll do it for lifelong. Well, we may not get any service like that from our Guru Maharaj. But that same Guru is present in our own heart as the Paramatma, the Chaitanya Guru. And if there's something which we just can't tolerate, then that could very well be the Lord telling us, now this is what you need to fix as a part of your service to me. And in that way, in fixing rather than blaming somebody else, oh, this person is terrible, this person is terrible, this person is terrible. Okay, how can I fix the situation? That's how we all can be a part of the solution in Krishna's movement, in Prabhupada's movement. I'll summarize what I discussed today. We were discussing mainly today about how do we deal with problems. So I talked about that the world is a place of distress is a universal truth, and there are three approaches to dealing with distress. There's the karma marg, jnana marg, and then the bhakti marg. So we discussed karma is basically about we glamorize the positives in this world and we try to maximize the positives. In jnana marg, we overall demonize the world. Nothing matters. All the dualities don't matter also. In bhakti, we utilize. Now utilize means what? We discussed how in Prabhupada's outreach also broadly, there are times when he said the dualities are insignificant. So for example, when he said just move into the temple, that is more or less forget this world. But okay, wherever you are, you try to bring Krishna into your world. So this Gyan and Bhakti, both Prabhupada used. So Gyan is move out of the world to Krishna. The world is all temporary. And that's not Bhakti. This is karma. So the karma marg being adopted in Bhakti means bring Krishna into your world. So bring Krishna into your world, wherever you are at. So for example, the life membership program was more about bringing Krishna into your world. So we can say Krishna is over here, but actually Krishna is all over in the material world also. And the last part we discussed is about what do we do then? In Bhakti, we can adopt the karma marg or the jnana marg. So we can tolerate in Bhakti or we can transform. And transform can be by mitigate or emigrate. And discuss various examples of how the Pandavas did various things, and especially what we can't tolerate. That could be the direction where we find our lifelong service, or a service that we feel connected with towards Krishna. So tolerating is not just being important. Tolerating is keeping small things small so that we can focus on the big things. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So Prabhuji actually asked me to thank you as well. So let us thank His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhu for this entire 3-day seminar that we had. I think the first was on Wednesday and Friday and then today. In fact, when the topic itself was announced, it made us all think, because all of us have heard several times why do bad things happen to good people, but this entire topic made us think, okay, what is going to be the content? So very well presented as always, and he has a very unique style of using this board and putting the points up. And in fact, if you even miss one of it during the class, we may get lost. So very, very wonderfully presented. So let us thank him by once chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. I have a question as well. I think, yeah. Prabhuji, in this karma marg approach that you said, right, you were mentioning two approaches. You said that one is the Vedic approach of approaching the devatas, etc. The other is the science and technology. That was very well presented. So as you were talking, I was just thinking, as practicing devotees, we don't mind taking up the scientific approach to mitigate our distress. Like I don't mind going to an HDFC bank and applying to a loan. Or, I don't mind a seed sowing program to get rain, etc. But if you would say that let us petition Indra for rain, or Kuvera for wealth, or Ashwini Kumaras for health, we may find that a little objectionable because we feel that it interferes in our faith to Krishna. So my general observation, the point you said is perfect, but I was just thinking for some reason, moving to science and technology as devotees, all of us, we don't mind going to scientists, politicians, doctors, educationists to mitigate. But here we do find a challenge. So what's the reason over there?
Yeah. I want to emigrate from this question. Well, see, so there is, with respect to worship, there is the means and there is not exactly the ends. This is not the best way to depict it. Okay. Any approach that we take, there are the practical means. And then there are the conceptual vision, like a worldview that is there. So what happens in general when we are adopting science? While science, when it goes towards scientism, can be atheistic. But science in general is non-theistic. It's not atheistic. God is not relevant over there. So what happens is the practical means within science, the practical means are what are more important. The conceptual thing that is less important. It's not all that important. Even if it were, it really doesn't affect us psychologically so much. Like I know some devotees, they are working in their PhD field with Darwin's theory of evolution. And I asked them, don't you have any cognitive dissonance? You are studying this theory and then the Puranic. He says, no, he says that's my job, this is my bhakti. Now, that I don't know whether that's the best way to reconcile. But from psychologically, they are not affected by that. They don't see that as a challenge to their devotion. It can be for some people who have studied the psychological, not the philosophical implications of the Darwinian worldview. For them, it could be. But for many people, it is not. It's like that's why sometimes when we talk about Darwin's theory of evolution or we talk about Big Bang theory, like people, first we have to tell that theory, then we have to tell them why that theory is wrong, and then we have to tell them how it matters for their spirituality. Isn't it? It's not an obstacle for them at all. But with respect to the worship of the devatas, what happens is the practical means, we might say it is much more, you could sattvic or dharmic, we are chanting some mantras, we are worshipping something. But often the conceptual vision that is associated, that can be a competitor for our bhakti. Now if it is not a competitor, then it is okay. Like with the gopis, they worship Katyayani. And that's for them, their ultimate goal is very clear, it's Krishna. So if it is not a competitor, then it's not a problem. Now, so another thing is, for us it may not be a competitor, but when we do it, it might reinforce the notions of people for whom it is a competitor. So that's why there is some reservation about it. But I would say that if somebody, for example, if somebody has some severe problems and they tried conventional allopathy or this or that is not working, and then they try to go to astrology or this or that, and they're told to chant some particular mantra to a particular devta or this or that, then as a movement, we don't have to make it a faith issue, and we don't have to stop them from doing it. We don't advocate it so much because of the great potential for the confusion with respect to the worship of the ultimate object of worship. See, in the Bhagavad, just after the Bhagavad Gita is spoken, Krishna, Arjuna is ready to fight. Arjuna says, Karishe vachanam tava. But then in the Mahabharata describes that Krishna and Arjuna both have seen Bhadrakali over there. And Krishna tells Arjuna, she is the goddess in charge of war. You should offer prayers to her. And then Arjuna gets down, offers prayers, and then gets up and then he fights. So Krishna has just said in the Bhagavatam, Alpa Medhasam. Then why is he telling Arjuna to worship Bhadrakali? So the idea is she has come there, and Krishna is not telling Arjuna, go to a Bhadrakali temple and worship her. She is already there. He said, you should offer respects to her. And what is Alpa Medhasa? If you look at the verses very carefully, less intelligent, Krishna is not saying worship of the Devatas is less intelligent. Thinking that the Devatas are the independent source of benediction, that is less intelligent. So, if somebody can see the Devatas as Krishna's appointed agents, and one can worship the Devatas in a mood of serving Krishna, without any competition to their object of devotion in their mind, then I don't think that's a big issue. So we as a movement should not stop people, but we may not publicly do it because that may reinforce people's confusions. In Delhi, in Delhi we have a temple where we have a temple over there where when I was invited to your class. In the temple itself there is a Durga deity, there is a Shiva deity, there is a Ganesh deity. So I was a little taken aback. But then after I talked with the temple leaders over there, they said this was a general Hindu temple and nobody was taking care of it. And our devotees were doing preaching. So the local administrators of that area, they said, can you take care of this temple? And our devotees said that, but we worship Krishna. He says, we know that. You can have Krishna in the center, but there are other deities, we cannot just throw them away. We cannot just do any visarjan or something like that of them. You have to take care of them also. So then we build a big temple of Krishna in the center. And then we have small altars for the other deities also. And we give bhoga to Krishna and then we give it to the other deities. So now, is that something which we would do ourselves if we are building a temple? No. But if we are getting a temple, and if this is a condition, it's not that we are against the worship of the Devatas. That's definitely not there. Sometimes we may come off like that. But the point is, we have a particular priority. Okay? Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for the wonderful class. It was a pleasure hearing the class.
You're tolerating?
So maybe I am trying to, take care of those persons' words. So, and very nice way you have explained on how the different kind of approaches of counteracting with distress. And towards the end, how you also explained on the aspect of, emigrate, migrate. I see kind of a fight and flight response, and then also the response of tolerate. So my question is, in most circumstances, we are dealing primarily with a unit, like either we are in a family unit, we are dealing with a team unit, or in a devotee community, we may be dealing with a community unit. And in those situations, there will definitely be different, as you also rightly addressed in the towards the end, different people will treat different things as small, different things as big. So how do we go about reconciling when it comes to dealing with the priority of whether the response should be fight, flight, or tolerate in the scenario of a unit which we might be dealing with?
Okay. See, first point is, I wouldn't equate emigrate with flight. Because see, in emigrating is not the same as running away. In running away or the flight response, the whole focus is, this is a terrible place, I just want to go away from here. But when we are talking about emigrating is, I want to serve Krishna and this situation is not favorable for my service to Krishna. So therefore, I don't want to get entangled in this. So it's not simply running away. If at all you want to use that term, it's more walking away. Walking towards something which is more meaningful, more purposeful for us. And even mitigate is not necessarily fighting. Fighting would be more like retaliate. See, retaliate means, you did this to me, I'll do this to you. Mitigate means, okay, this is the issue, this has to be fixed. Now sometimes for fixing the situation, some disciplinary action may have to be taken against some person. See, in the Kurukshetra war, the Pandavas were mitigating, they were not retaliating. If their purpose was to retaliate, they could have retaliated against Dhritarashtra also. But they saw Dhritarashtra had definitely played a part in causing suffering to them. But they saw that he was not the main agent. And now Duryodhan was no longer in the picture. So there is how Dhritarashtra was no big threat. So that's the first point, not simply fight and flight. Now, having said that, with respect to we operating in a particular unit, yes, that's definitely true. That's why sometimes we use the word Prabhupada's mood and mission. We just use those two words together, but in my understanding, the mission is one. The moods can be many. So it's like the mission is like a big umbrella. So like I said, Prabhupada's mood in dealing with Western disciples was just move into the temple. With respect to Indian life members, he was not talking about moving into the temple. He was talking about adding Krishna into their lives, more or less. So within Prabhupada's mission of sharing Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada could have different moods at different times. So in general, we have often stereotyped Prabhupada to be very confrontational. Prabhupada was definitely confrontational at times, but that was not all that he was all the time. So he had different moods at different times. So my understanding is that if we consider that mission to be like a big umbrella, we might be attracted to that mission within some small umbrella. But the umbrella within which we are attracted, the mood by which we are attracted, may not necessarily be the mood that we will sustain us throughout our spiritual life. And that's perfectly fine, as long as we are within the same mission. So we might find some other leaders whose mood we feel more attracted to. So we don't have to criticize any other mood, but if something inspires us, we adopt that particular mood, or we follow or connect with those who have that particular mood. And sometimes if we grow and we also gain influence, it's like we might also have our own umbrella, isn't it? Within Prabhupada's big umbrella. So we can have our own umbrella. So the problem is not having different moods. The problem is reducing the mission to only one mood. Now that doesn't mean that all moods are compatible with bhakti. There are some umbrellas which may go outside that big umbrella also, isn't it? So there are some boundaries, no doubt. But the boundary is not as rigid as we may think it to be. So yes, some devotees may feel that a particular service is the most important. And yes, then we can't expect that those devotees are going to change that mood. But that doesn't mean that if we have to feel suffocated or uncomfortable in our Krishna consciousness. We can find out where we can best serve. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last question. Where is it? Okay. Oh my God. Yes, Prabhu. We'll talk later separately.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for intellectual feast. So we would tolerate our hunger. So Prabhuji, in context of this tolerance, in Shikshashtakam, Mahaprabhu says, Trunadapi Sunuchina Tarorapi Sahishnava. So he's focusing on tolerance. So whatever you said about other than tolerance, there are other ways. So how could he consider?
Well, the point is Kirtaniya Sadahari. See, what is the purpose of tolerance? Trunadapi Tarorapi Sahishnava, Amanina Madina. It is all so that we can do Kirtaniya Sadahari. If we cannot do Kirtaniya Sadahari, then that is not, that tolerance is not useful. Like Mahaprabhu didn't tolerate Chand Kazi coming and disrupting the kirtans and breaking the mridanga. He tried to mitigate that. He led a protest march at that time. So the point is that Kirtaniya Sadahari, that is the key thing. So Prahlad Maharaj, he tolerated Hiranyakashipu in the sense that he was always at a personal level respectful to Hiranyakashipu. But being respectful and being tolerant, Amanina Manadena, doesn't mean that when Hiranyakashipu or Chandamarka told him that, don't worship Vishnu, he would agree to that. For him, maintaining the etiquette and the respect in that relationship was important. That was the important thing and he did that. But that was not the biggest thing. So he did not say that, okay, I have to maintain the etiquette in this relationship and he is my father, so I'll obey my father and I'll stop practicing bhakti. No, he did not let that. So in general, we all have to find out how that kirtan is sadahari. Tadvirya gayan mahamritamagna chitta. The glorification of the Lord can go on in our life, in our particular position. And so for the purpose of glorifying, we tolerate. See, Krishna tells Arjuna, Tam sitiksha sobharata, tolerate. Now, Arjuna does not take it to me, no, the Kauravas have done so many atrocities to us, they have taken away our kingdom, they did such terrible things to all the Draupadi, I should just tolerate it. He fights. So tolerance is important, but tolerance is not the most important thing. Tolerance is for something more important. When if tolerance becomes the most important thing, then tolerance basically, it can lead us towards transcendence or it can lead us towards impotence. Impotence means if we make it the most important thing, it is a means to the most important thing. So, for example, whatever we are doing, we have to tolerate many things in our life. But we also have to do some things. We have to do some service. We have to hear about Krishna. So that is more important. And for that we tolerate certain things and some things we don't tolerate. Okay? Thank you very much. Granthraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki, Itai Gaur Premanande.